Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics. There's just one full week of campaigning left in the general election campaign, and today we're continuing our series of interviews with the party leaders. Senator Mal O'Hara from the Green Party and Aontu's Gemma Brawley are with me in the studio. We'll also cross to London to get the latest on the battle for Downing Street. And here with his thoughts on what we're discussing, John Manley from the Irish News. Today's papers won't do much for Rishi Sunak's confidence just 11 days out from the election. This morning, Cabinet Ministers are having to respond to the allegations about bets being placed on the date of the election, something Michael Gove compared yesterday to Partygate. Meantime, a new poll in this morning's Sunday Telegraph has Conservative Party support hitting a new low. Let's get some analysis of where we are from Lucy Fisher from the Financial Times. Lucy, welcome to the programme. How would you say the battle's shaping up with just over a week to go?
Well, look, the Tory campaign has lurched from gaffe to error to disaster, and this week, in a sense, has been no different, with the Bettinggate scandal that's emerged, and worse news for the party this morning with the Sunday Times scoop that a fourth senior Conservative, Nick Mason, the party's chief data officer, is also now under investigation by the Gambling Commission and has taken a leave of absence from the party. Sunday Times suggests he may have placed dozens of bets related to the election before it was called. So I think that is just a real setback for the party that has stirred up a lot of anger among other Conservative colleagues and indeed from the Prime Minister himself. And I think we saw a glimpse of that in the Question Time special last Thursday when he said he was incredibly angry and made clear that sort of sense of betrayal that he clearly feels let down by the individuals involved in this.
The polls have been fairly consistent, it has to be said, since the election started. That's showing a huge Labour majority. Is there anything the Tories, you think, can do to change that? We've got this poll in the Sunday Times today. Tory support collapses to new polling low is the headline.
Well, I mean, there's just been a spate of polls and MRP models that, show seat-by-seat results in the election. And this week, there's been a big variation in the numerical kind of result for the Tories, the worst giving them just 53 seats after the election. And for context, that would be down from 365 in 2019. Others, the most favourable to the Conservatives think they might end up with more like 155. Still a crushing defeat. So while there is variation, the trend is the same. And you mentioned a poll out this morning from Savanta, which has put the Tories on a 5-year low in the past week, again suggesting that Labour is now on 42%, the Tories just on 19%, and Reform UK 3 points behind that on 16%. So it's all looking pretty grim. And you ask, what can the Tories do now to try and turn it around? Only one full week of campaigning left. Many in the campaign admit there aren't very many scheduled moments left. There's a sort of a Sun event between the two leaders on Monday. There's the BBC head-to-head debate on Wednesday evening. But bar that, and bar a miracle for the Conservatives, most people I speak to inside the party are consigned now to losing.
And it says a lot, doesn't it, Lucy, that Savanta poll in the Sunday Telegraph today is asking voters about their views on the whys and wherefores of a supermajority. I mean, it's not very often we've seen that in the past.
Well, it's true. And the thing that's beginning to now seep through the Labour camp is concern that the public have, received this message that it's pretty much nailed on that Keir Starmer's going to get a supermajority, that could lead to some people thinking, well, I don't need to bother to make the journey to the polling station on July the 4th, or might think, well, I want Labour to win, or at least the Tories to be out of government, but, I don't want any party to sort of enter some imperial phase with a supermajority, so I might vote for another, one of the smaller parties. So this narrative has really sparked a lot of fear in Labour that it could depress their turnout on the day.
Just a word about Nigel Farage's return to the front line of UK politics. This poll in the Sunday Telegraph today has the Tories on 19%, as we've said, and Reform on 16%. But of course, it's a complicated electoral system, first past the post, as we know. Just briefly, that does not necessarily mean that 16%, if that's what they end up with, will in any way translate into a huge number of seats.
Well, that's right. And one of these MRP models this week found that Reform would get no seats. That would mean an eighth attempt and failure by Nigel Farage himself to get elected to Parliament. Other MRP models, forecast that Reform might pick up a few seats. But you're right. I think if they do live up to their national vote share, but fall far short in terms of the seats they pick up, this will really reignite the debate about the UK's majoritarian voting system and renew calls from some quarters for proportional representation to be introduced.
OK, got to leave it there. Lucy Fisher, great to talk to you as always. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's turn our attention to the battle for seats in the 18 Northern Ireland constituencies. The Green Party's Mal O'Hara joins me now. Welcome to the programme. You're running candidates in 11 constituencies in this election. Considering you've never won a Westminster seat up to now, do you think that's perhaps a bit overambitious?
Well, Mark, I think it sets out the stall of ambition we have as a party. In 2019, we stood aside in a number of seats, and that was a tactic to get rid of Brexiteers, and we had success in North Belfast, South Belfast and North Down. The unfortunate reality was on the bigger island next door, they voted Brexiteers on en masse, and we had the disaster of Boris Johnson's government and a significant majority that he had, and we saw the fallout from Brexit and the Windsor Protocol and the Irish Sea border and all of that debate for instability here in Northern Ireland. So this time we're back. We're standing 11 candidates. It's the most we've ever stood. Our party's at its highest membership number in my time of 10 years in the party. So we're offering a unique policy platform that others are not.
Yeah, unlikely that you're going to win any seats. I want to dig a little bit deeper into the confusion maybe that there will be in voters' minds about the fact that you didn't stand last time, but you are standing this time. You are standing personally in North Belfast against Sinn Féin's John Finucane. And of course, in 2019, you didn't stand and your party backed Mr Finucane as part of that pro-Remain pact. So your presence on the ballot paper could cost him that seat on July the 4th. Why are you running?
Let's be clear, Mark, we didn't endorse John Finucane in North Belfast. We stood out of the way and we encouraged our voters
You endorsed pro-Remain candidates and he was the pro-Remain candidate
to
in North
vote
Belfast.
for the best placed candidate to win. And, other parties had a significant uptake in their vote in North Belfast as well. The only candidate we endorsed was Claire Hannah in South Belfast. But this time we're standing on a unique policy platform. I think the election 5 years ago was a Brexit special, and we knew the damage that Brexit would do to Northern Ireland, and that's why we made the tactical decision to stand aside.
You, of course, were elected to the Shanna just a few months ago. I mean, you're barely in the door there, and here you are looking for another job. Do you not think you need to pick a lane?
Well, I think in terms of this election, we knew that it was in the offing at some stage this year. Rishi Sunak, I think, surprised many when he called it so early. I've just had my feet under the table at the Shannon. I'm moving forward with law, legislation, attempts to make positive change for people right across the island. And I think in North Belfast, the Greens there wanted me to stand as the most high-profile member and to offer people an alternative on a unique policy platform.
Well, we've had a conversation, I think, on this programme about how serious you were going to be if you got that seat in the Shannon. You did get the seat. You're just telling me now how serious you are about contributing to that legislative debate. But yet, you would, turn your back on that and take up your seat in Westminster if you were successful in North Belfast?
Yes, and if the people of North Belfast chose me, I think we have a number of Shannon
that's confusing, isn't it?
Shannon and TD by-elections after the results of the European Parliament. So if I was to be successful in North Belfast, that would be no problem with me taking the seat in a by-election being held.
You don't think that would be confusing for voters?
No, I think people will want to see me standing as offering a unique policy platform, Mark. We're talking about issues that others are not. We're talking about a wealth tax. Greens across the UK are suggesting that's a way to fix our broken public services. That means the richest 1%, those with worth of more than 3.4 million, need to pay a little bit more in taxation, which means we can rebuild public services, build social housing to avoid the housing crisis in the UK, and of course then fund the climate transition to a net zero society.
We'll talk a little bit more about policy in a moment or two. You mentioned Claire Hannah there. This may confuse voters as well. Your former leader, Claire Bailey, has endorsed the SDLP candidate, Claire Hannah, in South Belfast rather than your own candidate, Anya Grugan, which is not a great look when the most successful Green Party leader you've had backs a rival candidate.
Claire's a private citizen, moved on from the party a year and a half ago, Mark. We have a new candidate, as you say, Anya Grugan, who's just come off a very successful year as Deputy Lord Mayor in Belfast. And I'm excited about making that offer to people in South Belfast with our unique policy platform.
The Green Party's no MLAs, of course, since Claire Bailey and Rachel Woods lost their seats in the last Assembly election. You do have 5 councillors, 3 in Belfast City Council, 2 in Ards and North Down. I mean, it has to be said, worldwide climate change is now an issue that's front and centre of the global conversation, and yet your party can't seem to capitalise on that situation. Why not?
Well, I think, Mark, in Northern Ireland, we're in a very difficult situation. We're not a normal political society yet. We still haven't completed that transition to a post-conflict society. So those wider debates, we often get suckered back into the idea of constitutional politics. I don't think it's fair to say Northern Ireland's the same as GB or the same as the Republic.
Well, it's clearly not exactly the same. But no, the narrative that you're putting forward is the reason for your lack of success in Northern Ireland. In fact, is the same narrative in terms of what's happening to the Greens across the water in GB and also in the Republic.
I think in the rest of GB, we're going to see the English Greens collect a number of seats. I mean, they're looking good for Bristol Central, holding on to Brighton, and on a good evening, they could surprise on a number of other seats. You talked about polling in the earlier segment. We've seen there's a real opportunity in mid-Herefordshire and Waveney Valley, so we'll see the Greens doing well, but I think Northern Ireland's an exception. And I would say to people, we get stuck here in voting tactically against people rather than for something, and for people to look at our manifesto, look at our policy priorities and vote for something positive.
OK, well, as far as policies are concerned, you've posted some on your social media feeds. You say you'll reverse what you call executive/Tory cuts to public services. If you were to be returned as a Green MP, how exactly would you do that? Because you have no representatives in the Assembly at the moment.
Well, I think this is a UK-wide election, Mark, so I'm specifically talking about the wealth tax. The Greens across the UK are very focused on that those of wealth of more than 3.4 million need to pay a little bit more tax.
You're never going to be in government across the UK.
But I think, Mark, I think what we've already heard today is that the Tories are toast. We all accept that, and Labour is likely going to form the next government. But we need a set of independents and Greens who will dare Labour to be a little bit braver. And the wealth tax is one example of policy where they need to be braver to fix broken public services.
But it is confusing for people as to what the issues are that they should be deciding how to cast their vote. In another of your social media posts, you say you'll end the failed war on drugs. We support treating drug addiction as a health matter, not a criminal one, you say. Now, health and justice are devolved, though. This is a Westminster election, as you've just said yourself. Yes. You'd have no influence over what's happening as far as that matter is concerned either.
Well, actually, Mark, yes, we would, because the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, which is 50 years old and completely outdated, we've seen a social media storm this week about vulnerable people on the streets of Belfast. The Belfast City Council supported my call for an overdose prevention centre in Belfast last year. Unanimously, nobody voted against that. But unfortunately, ministers for justice, health, education, communities have sat on their hands. What we need to do at the UK Parliament level is repeal the Misuse of Drugs Act. And that means that local ministers, that means that we can address drug deaths in Northern Ireland.
One last one. I'll take a yes or a no answer on this. In the local elections in the Republic this month, the Green Party lost more than half its seats, dropping from 49 seats to 23. Are you telling me that in this election you're going to reverse that trend?
Well, I think we knew we were in for a tough election in the South, Mark. All the polling was indicated that, but we proved to be resilient. And now with new leadership and new energy coming into the party, nominations are open until 9 p.m. tomorrow night for Deputy Leader and Leader. And we'll see what the options are. Well, nominations will close tomorrow night, Mark, so we'll see who the runners and riders are. And there are over 600 members who will be able to vote in.
But as the Green Party leader in this jurisdiction, will you endorse a candidate in that battle?
Historically, Mark, I haven't endorsed either as leader or deputy leader, and I'll probably maintain that should the candidate field become clear by Monday. OK, right. Interesting to talk to you as ever. Matt O'Hara, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for coming in to join us. You can find a full list of candidates, by the way, standing in the general election on the BBC News NI website. Let's get some analysis of what Matt O'Hara's had to say from John Manley from the Irish News. Welcome. John, you can be pretty forthright on social media when it comes to expressing your views on protecting the environment and regulating agriculture, but you're here today clearly as a political correspondent. What did you make of Matt O'Hara's pitch?
Well, I don't think even the most enthusiastic or optimistic environmentalists could understate the challenge, the significance of the challenge that faces the Green Party. They've come from 2 seats in the Assembly just a matter of years ago. They've lost a number of councillors. So they're starting from a very low base. But I think it's important, this while Mal would insist he's fighting a Westminster campaign, this is really the party setting out their stall for future local government and Assembly elections.
Here's the question I suppose a lot of people will be wondering. The Greens stood back in 2019, as we were discussing there. In hindsight, was that perhaps a mistake?
I think electorally it certainly was a mistake, despite their best intentions at the time, and it was a very unique election that we were fighting. I think that has damaged them in terms of organisation and people not seeing their name on the ballot.
You wouldn't, I suppose, expect Mal O'Hara to say anything other than he's confident that that there's going to be a return to form for his party. He wouldn't be much of a leader if he didn't say that. But when you look at what's just happened in the Republic of Ireland, when you look at how few seats the Greens really are in the running for across the water in GB in this election, and the lack of probability of making any real electoral impact here in this election, is this all about building profile for the next Assembly and local government election?
Oh, without a doubt. I've said that it's important that that a party contests elections like this simply for the reason of organisational cohesion. But I don't think there's any realistic possibility of them emerging with a seat, and they'll be simply happy if they increase their share of the vote on the last Assembly election, perhaps because it's 2017 since they last stood in a general election.
Just very briefly, are green issues as important, do you think, to people as they face into a cost of living crisis? Is that what this comes down to potentially?
I think there's still an eye on environmental issues, but they've also, you'll only have to look at the Alliance manifesto this week. The Green New Deal is front and centre in their manifesto. OK. John,
for now, thank you very much indeed. We'll hear from you again shortly, but let's turn now to Aontu, and I'm pleased to say the party's Deputy Leader, Gemma Brawley, is with me now. Welcome to you. Good to see you. In last year's council elections, Aontu lost the only seat you held in Northern Ireland. You polled 7,500 votes. In total, presumably you have no expectation of being in contention for a seat anywhere on July the 4th.
Well, we would have to say, yeah, last year we lost that seat. That was disappointing, but we were against the dynamic of, just this time, just this once, for a nationalist majority. Really, we were still hearing that very much, but we are very much building. We're coming off the back of a very successful election in the south, and we have faith and we have determination. We're a self-determined party here for the people on the ground.
Yeah, but I mean, the Green Party, and we've just heard from Mal O'Hara, they're political giants compared to Aontu, and we've just heard John saying, it's unlikely that the Greens are actually going to make any real dent in terms of winning seats this time round.
Yeah, we're very realistic here, Mark. We are 5 years old. You can go back, we're a very new party. If we look historically to any party, it takes time to get off the ground. We're all very well aware of that. But we believe there is a demand, very much so an apathy at the minute, especially in this election. We believe people need a voice, and we have stepped up to the plate. We're standing in 10 constituencies because we're not about pacts. We're about the people. We're about giving the people a voice and being there on principle for those people.
So I just want to try to drill down and find out precisely what the purpose of Aontu running in this election is, what you think you will achieve from it. So you stood at the last local government elections in the Ban ward of Causeway, Coast and Glens Council. You polled 336 first preference votes. You came 10th out of 12. So you're standing in East Londonderry this time, where the outgoing MP polled 15,765 votes back in 2019, and your party's candidate won 4.4% of the vote. Think about 1,700 votes. What are you hoping to get out of this election?
We are hoping to give those people who are so apathetic, to invite them back onto the table. We're hoping to enthuse people to get involved again, to have a voice in politics, and we're hoping, of course, to build our base. 5 years old, our membership is ever growing. As I've mentioned, we're bouncing off the south. We believe this is coming.
You don't want to overplay what happened in the south. I mean, you had 3 seats. You now have 8 out of 949. 39,000 votes, yes, but that gives you 2 of the first preference vote. You still have one TD out of 160. You need to be careful not to overplay that.
We're definitely not overplaying that, as I've just said, and you alluded to as well there, against the Greens, we're 5 years old. So we are definitely on our way to making progress. We're very happy with that. We have to look
backwards. If you actually look at the numbers, it looks like you're going backwards.
Absolutely not. I would have to contest. You asked me the question. So we would have to say that this is a platform as well to look at the bigger playing field here as well. We're looking to Westminster. We're looking at perhaps 18 seats out of 650. We believe we're an innovative party. We have brought more options onto the table here. We're looking towards the south as well, and we need people to start hearing that. We've heard about it last week in Ireland's future.
The place where you are most likely to do well would be in local government, where there are the most seats and where you are maybe closest to the voters. And recent results suggest Aontu is going backwards rather than forwards, because in that most recent poll, the local elections in 2023, you lost your only sitting councillor and your share of the vote fell to less than 1%.
Yes, and as I've already said, there was such a dynamic there. It's no secret.
But that's going backwards, not forwards.
But we are moving forwards now in the south. And if you want to take into account as well, I had the votes in my own area, but we were loyal to the people who were asking us to stand. I'm also from North Antrim. We have been inundated for the past few years with requests. Why have we nobody to vote for? We're now standing there. We're very much on the ground for the people. We're here in health. We're here, and just yesterday we hear about the ambulatory services that are spending there's 40 million been spent in private services. We are still on the ground. We're still campaigning.
How many members do you have at the moment in Northern Ireland?
We have, in the north, in total we have approaching 2,000 at the minute.
Okay.
We would have about 700.
Which is small even by the standard of the Greens.
We're 5 years old. We're not under any illusions. We're not arguing. We're small fish in a big pond, but we have huge potential, huge energy. We're on the ground. We're involved in hospital campaigns. We're fighting for vital services. I want to ask you about that, actually, because you've mentioned hospital campaigns. In your party election broadcast, you mentioned waiting lists, and you say the health service is buckling. Now, in Fermanagh South Tyrone, the former head of the Royal College of Nursing is running to retain the seat for Sinn Féin against a single unionist candidate. And we know that seat can come down to the narrowest of margins. It was 57 votes that won it for Sinn Féin last time round. By running there, you could in fact cost republicanism that seat. Are you at all concerned at that? We're absolutely not anti-sectarian headcounts here. But you do support a
32-county
absolutely.
Ireland.
But this is about the people. We're not here to accommodate, to represent other parties. We're not here to work for parties. We're here to work for people. We're here to be on the ground in those campaigns and hospital campaigns and education. I myself am a special needs coordinator, and I am well aware of what's coming rolling down the line. The combination that is needed, the work that is needed to combine health and education to address problems that we do not see happening. These are the practical solutions that we feel we can bring to the table.
Then you have to explain the consequences of that. If, for example, in Fermanagh South Tyrone, it's very close, and of course it is. But I just wonder what the voters of Fermanagh South Tyrone might have to say to you or to your candidate in Fermanagh South Tyrone if it ends up that Sinn Féin loses that seat to that single unionist candidate by a narrow majority, and the presence of Aontu in the ballot paper could potentially have made all the difference. Do you think Republicans will be happy about that? Will forgive Aontu if that's what happens?
We are a political party that come off the principle of United Irishmen, of Protestant, Catholic and dissenter. This is, as I've said, this is not about accommodating parties. This is about being there for the people. In fact, we've had many recent conversations with the unionists. Very recently, I actually received a message myself asking, what is the purpose? How can unionism have a seat at the table in a united Ireland?
Okay.
These are the conversations that need to be had,
right. Let me ask you this.
Not sectarian headcounts.
OK, all right. In 2018, Peadar Tabine resigned, as we know, from Sinn Féin because he felt he was repeatedly marginalised by the party for his anti-abortion views, and he decided to set up Aontu as a party dedicated to protecting life. Doesn't the fact that abortion has been decriminalised here in this jurisdiction and is now available across the island of Ireland mean your party has lost its primary reason to exist, as far as a lot of voters are concerned?
Absolutely not. That we stand on three pillars: life, unity and economic justice. We're not on our own there either. We believe we're hearing increasingly from people who were duped by that legislation, by the way, people who were led into false pretences and are now realising just what exactly that legislation has brought to the table: abortion up to birth for children with fatal abnormalities. Many even stood on the streets and questioned us that we had to have that wrong.
So that's an issue that you think will still draw votes?
Absolutely, and that's
okay,
something that we are there to do, is answer those questions.
All right, we've got to leave it there. Gemma Brawley, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed for coming in to join us. Let's hear final thought from John Manley, who's been listening to all of that. Well, we covered a lot of ground there in a relatively short period of time. What did you make of what Gemma Brawley had to say about the case for Aontu? Do you think it'll resonate more now than perhaps it has done in the past?
Well, again, in a similar to the Greens, they're starting off at a very small base. The party is only 5 years old. They need to, I think, once again, to stand while there's little prospect of them gaining any Westminster seats. They need this again for organisational reasons to keep up a profile.
Small but significant growth, Gemma is pointing to in the Republic of Ireland. Significant for Aontu, but actually the numbers in real terms are tiny.
Yes, and they where we would have expected them to make a breakthrough, as you say, at the local government elections in the north, they lost a seat. But I still, they are in many ways. I don't think either Peadar Tabine or Jim Allister will thank me for saying this, but there are parallels with that. They maintain a sort of, shall we call it, a pre-watershed traditional position that they see themselves as a conscience of a certain ideology. Whether there's growth, I'm not sure. I think there's limited returns in that stance.
What do you think success would look like for Aontu when we're looking at the numbers on July the 5th?
I think a simple growth in its vote, nothing more. I can't think they can expect anything more.
OK. What about Fermanagh South Tyrone and the idea that the intervention of an Aontu candidate could cost Pat Cullen that seat, Sinn Féin that seat? I mean, could that end up being an issue?
I'm not entirely convinced by that argument, because there are people, Aontu voters are the disaffected Sinn Féin voters, and whether they would hold their nose and go and vote for Michelle Gildernew, given their opposition to abortion, is debatable.
Just a word about the overall campaign. We talked to Lucy Fisher about how it's looking UK-wide. In terms of Northern Ireland, what have you made of it so far?
It's been a bit lacklustre, certainly. I expect it to gain a bit of traction. We've got a leaders' debate coming up this afternoon and the BBC one later in the week. So hopefully things should pick up a little.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it is confusing, isn't it, I think, for voters to know precisely what it is they are voting about and for, because there is this split between what is relevant as far as Westminster is concerned and the voice that Northern Ireland MPs would have, and then actually what the issues are, which tend to be focused on the Assembly.
Yes, in many ways, the Westminster is increasingly irrelevant, given the prominence of the Assembly. So, but, the media, we get caught up in the media hype around elections. OK, John, thank you very much indeed for that. Just a reminder, by the way, of course, that there's a full list of all of the candidates on the BBC News NI website. You can find all the details you want there. And that's it for today. We've plenty more pre-election coverage this week on BBC News NI. Tomorrow morning, Good Morning Ulster, we'll be live from the South Antrim constituency. We'll wrap up our series of leaders' interviews with Michelle O'Neill from Sinn Féin on The View, and that's on Tuesday night at 10:40. So for this week only, we're moving to Tuesday. Of course, you can catch up on all our previous interviews on BBC iPlayer. We'll continue our tour of constituencies on our Red Lines podcast, with a new episode dropping on Wednesday. This week, we're looking at the 4 Belfast seats. And then on Thursday night, Tara Mills will be hosting the BBC's Northern Ireland Leaders Debate. That's at 9 o'clock here on BBC One. But for now, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.